Well, welcome. Jeez, this is loud. I probably don't even need this, but I'll talk softly. I'm used to projecting pretty well, but welcome. Happy to see you all here this morning. What we're going to talk about today is who's prepared to take your place. And so this is about succession planning. And so we'll jump right in. And by the way, I want this to be very informal. If you have questions, feel free to just jump in and ask them, okay? So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to try and help you understand the difference between leadership development and succession planning. They're not the same thing. Although one is really a consistent component of the other. We're going to review a plan to develop leaders along with some available resources that I can recommend. We're going to talk about developing a career ladder, and John used to work in my organization. He's familiar with that. And then lastly, we're going to review Amy's HTM succession planning guide, which was just recently developed and published. So I always like to start with why. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and so I always like to start with why. And so I think it's helpful to ask some questions. The first one being, are there opportunities that you're missing because you neither have the time or the available talent to pursue them? Right now, your organizations need as much help as they can get to control costs and increase efficiencies. One of the best ways to do that is to have your people as developed as they can possibly be and be as efficient as they can possibly be. And so that's a good question to ask. The next one is what you have developed worth maintaining after you're gone, right? So if you're in a leadership position, certainly you want to have consistency so you're able to maintain that if you decide to move on. I may retire someday, and I'll make sure that whoever steps into the role that I'm in can do so and keep things moving in a positive direction. And then the last question, are you relevant in your organization? And this is a thing too, that if you're ensuring that all of your people are as competent as they can possibly be in the roles that they're in, but are also preparing for the next role that they want to be in, you're going to make sure that things are done in a way in your organization that you're taking advantage of all opportunities. And so I'm just going to ask, in general, among the folks that are here, who's involved in capital planning efforts within their organization today? A couple of you, okay. Who's involved in equipment utilization, right sizing, and managing equipment rentals? Okay, a couple. Who's involved in project planning? Okay, more of you. That's good. And who would consider themselves CTO material? Chief Technology Officer. So, well, don't be shy. If you think that that's a path that you want to pursue.
Well, that's a different question. Is the competency capability there versus is that something you want to do? But nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you that for my own personal career path, I'm currently a vice president of healthcare strategy for Accruent, a software company. So we have a number of CMMS offerings. I started with Mainspring Healthcare Solutions, had Asset Enterprise. TMS is one of the products that we have, and then certainly Connective is our go-forward solution. But throughout my entire tenure, I spent most of my time at Aurora Healthcare. Started out back in the late 70s carrying a toolbox. But in each role that I've ever been in, the first day that I was in that role, I started preparing or acting like I was in the next role up. So when I was a tech, I did the things that a lead tech would typically do. When I became a lead tech, I started doing the things that a supervisor would typically do. When I became a supervisor, I started doing the things that a manager would do. when I became a manager, I started doing things a director and on and on and on, because if I'm looking to hire somebody and I have a choice between somebody who's got potential and somebody who's already demonstrated that they can handle that role and do it well, who am I going to hire? Right? Pretty simple. So again, let's start by understanding the difference between leadership development and succession planning. So back when I was at Aurora, we had a guest speaker come into our leadership presentation or our leadership conference that we had every year. Actually, I think it might have been in this building, but we had a guest speaker, Benjamin Zander, and he and his wife wrote this book, The Art of Possibility. And in that book, he talks about the art or leading from any chair, the concept of leading from any chair. And it's something that I've always promoted in every organization that I've been in. John, you might remember the quarterly staff meetings that we used to have. We'd gather all of our teams together, and then within that, there were breakout sessions where each of the different modality groups would meet and talk about things that were specifically relevant to their group. And when we first started doing that, I would just go off and catch up on emails or make phone calls. And after a couple of meetings, it occurred to me that I was missing a tremendous opportunity. And what I started to do was I held a different session for all of the new hires that we brought in that previous quarter, okay? And I did that so that they would get to know who I was and what I was about, what my expectations were. And I had an opportunity to get to know them on a much more personal level. But one of the things that I did in that was encourage each and every one of them as being the fresh set of eyes coming into our organization. If they saw anything that we were doing that didn't make sense, or if there was something that they knew of a better way to do because of what other places that they had been, I wanted to know about that. I wanted them to bring that to my attention. And so not only did I give them permission to come forward with those ideas, but I encouraged it, right? And so that kind of goes back to that concept of leading from any chair, right? You want to give all of your staff that mindset that their opinions matter and that they have an opportunity to help you as an organization get better, okay? So this is something that was a part of every single job description within our group. And what I'm showing here is a biomed equipment tech job description. But under the essential functions, you see that bullet under that says it acts as a resource on more technical issues and mentors biomedical assistants to help them grow in ability, responsibility, and experience, right? So Tech 1's had that responsibility to coach and mentor the biomed assistants. If you go to look at the Biomed Tech 2, it's the same thing, right? So now the Biomed Tech 2s are responsible for coaching and mentoring the Tech 1s and the biomed assistants. And similarly, a Tech 3, same thing, and all the way up the chain, right? Where we made sure that people understood that was part of the expectation, is that they be in that role a leader, right? So how do you develop leaders? Well, I guess first of all, if you aren't a strong leader yourself, then it's difficult for you to identify leadership attributes in others, right? And so I always encourage people, these are 2 books that I strongly recommend. I've got a number of books by John C. Maxwell, but these are 2 good ones for leadership development. One, Developing the Leader Within You, and the second edition of that is out and is fairly recent. But again, it helps you be the best leader that you can be, so that you can in turn develop other leaders, right? And then the second book is Developing the Leaders Around You, and you know, that helps you It helps you identify leadership attributes in others, right, and develop those. So some advice on hiring. I would recommend, and I always talk about this as it relates to customer service skills as well. I've always been of a mind that you can more easily teach the technical stuff than good customer service skills, right? And so you want to make sure that you bring in people that have that out of the gate. And I would say the same thing about leadership ability, okay? If I was interviewing somebody for any tech position, I would look for leadership ability within that individual as well. Who in the room here is in a position to do interviewing? Okay, pretty much everybody. And do you all use behavioral interviewing? Okay, so then you know how to ask questions in a way that draw out examples of how those people have demonstrated leadership, right? How they've demonstrated good customer service skills and the like. Okay. The other thing too, I have I've got a set of books by Mac Anderson called Simple Truths. Do you guys all know who Mac Anderson is? So he ran a company called Successories, so those motivational posters. So that was his company, and then he started another company called Simple Truths, and there are a number of books within that series. And one of them is You Can't Send a Duck to Eagle School. Okay, and the thought there is, you have to make sure that people have the makeup to succeed in a particular role. And again, that's why when I'm hiring, I want to make sure that people have that potential, right, before I even bring them on board. And one of the concepts he talks about in that book is, if your job is to climb a tree, would you rather hire a squirrel or train a horse? So again, if you want someone who can soar, they first have to have the qualities that will allow them to do that. So what are some of the traits that you should be looking for? These are and by the way, this is another book by John C. Maxwell entitled The 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader. So let's walk through these. The first is character, okay? You want to look for somebody that is solid as a rock with regard to character, somebody who walks the talk and lives out their integrity in everything that they do. And with that, this is clearly somebody that you can trust, right? In a number of the positions that I've had over time, you had a dispersed workforce, right? So you didn't have people all in one room that you could keep an eye on. Not that you want to do that anyways, or should feel that you have to, but if you got people that are traveling around to different sites, you have to be able to trust them, right? If you can't do that, you're dead in the water, right? So that's number one. You want to make sure that they're people of character. Second is charisma. This is someone who draws people to them like moths to the flame. Someone that others want to be around, and someone who values others, right? I know all of you have people in your organization that you could point out that are like that. They look for ways that they could help their coworkers, right? Going back to the coaching and mentoring at every position, this is somebody that's going to jump to be able to do that, right? Commitment. This is somebody who does whatever it takes, and it's reflected in their actions, right? Whatever they have to do to solve a problem, whatever they have to do to help the department move forward, that's what they're going to do. Communication. They have the ability to be clear and get the message across no matter what the message is or who the audience is, okay? And I'll tell you, that's an extremely important thing as you get into developing leaders and looking for planning for someone to succeed into a leadership role. Communication is extremely important, both written and verbal. Competence, they're always on their game and they always look to excel. When I first started, as a technician, my areas of responsibility were cardiology. Okay, so it was the cath labs and EP labs, and every day they had a noon conference in the auditorium where they would present different procedures that they were looking to develop, or would talk about how they went about doing things. And rather than walking over to the Marquette campus and ogling the girlies that were walking around, I would go to noon conference and learn as much as I could about what they were doing. And so what that did for me as a tech is I developed a strong rapport with the clinical folks, the doctors and the nurses and the technologists in those areas, so that I could talk the talk. And when they had a problem, I could walk in and know immediately what they were trying to accomplish and how they weren't able to do that, and it helped me fix the problem much more readily. Okay. And so that level of commitment is something that you should really be looking for, and the competence as well. Courage is the next one. It goes from I can do anything to we can do anything, and conviction to stand by what is right, and exciting things in life take courage to try. One of the things that I talk to my next tier leadership about often when I was in director roles was always do the right thing. Always do the right thing, no matter what. And not everybody is going to be happy about that. There's a saying that what's right isn't always popular, and what's popular isn't always right. Okay. So if you just do what you know in your heart is the right thing to do, you're going to be fine. And if you end up getting fired because you did the right thing, you don't want to work there anyway, right? Discernment. So this is somebody who finds the balance between their gut and their head. Is anybody, what's the book I'm trying to think of? Blink. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, and it's very good, and it talks about that concept of, it's really interesting. The more complex an issue, the more inclined you are to find the right answer from your gut rather than your head, right? You've all heard about paralysis by analysis, right? Simple problems, you're more inclined to do the analysis and find the right solution with that. But the more complex the problem, the more inclined you are to find the right answer from your gut. Focus. If you chase two rabbits, both will escape. You ever heard that? So find what people's strengths are and focus on areas of strength. That was another thing that I've done over the years is, have you ever heard of something called Strengthsfinder? This is something that was developed by Gallup. And so you buy the books and they're like, I don't know, $5, $6, and then you get a code that you can go in and fill out this lengthy survey, and based on how you answer those questions, it gives you a report out on what your top 5 strengths are. And why that's important is, at least for me, I've always found that if you allow people to do what they do best, and that's what they love to do, right? Rather than trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole. If I found that you excelled in this thing that I needed to get done, why would I assign that to Tom, right? So he's going to be grumbling and grousing about it and probably not do as good a job as you would if I gave it to you, right? So that's something I would look for too, is to try and identify what people's strengths are and then direct things toward those strengths. Generosity, time, talents, knowledge, money. My dad always told me you can't outgive God, okay? The more you give, the more you get. And so you want to find people who are generous, again, with their time, their talents. Initiative. Sitting still doing nothing is not an option. Another Another thing that my dad always told me, it still resonates in the back of my head: do something, boy, even if it's wrong. So okay, initiative. You want to find people who don't wait to be able to be directed to do something, right? They'll know what needs to be done and do it. Tom, I just had an example of that yesterday. Cole Franklin, who's one of our customer success managers, reached out to me to see if he could find, if I could spare some time to help coach and mentor him, because he wants to get to the next level and potentially do some of the stuff that I do, right? I love that. I love that. I love the fact that this person would take that kind of initiative rather than have somebody, identify that in him, and he wants to get to the next level, and so he's going to be proactive about figuring out how to get there, right? Listening. You guys, I'm sure you've all heard there's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? There's another saying that the Dalai Lama expressed, that if you're talking, you can only convey what you already know, but if you listen, you might learn something new. Okay, so you want to find people who are good at listening. Relationships. You want to have people who value relationships and are good at building relationships. Everybody in here has carried a toolbox at one point, right? Okay, so you know firsthand how important relationships are with the staff that you serve, right? And how much trust you can build with them if you develop those relationships, right? Responsibility. You want to find people who don't try to dodge responsibility, but they'll take responsibility. If they make mistakes, they'll own up to it, right? Again, this is somebody that you can trust if you know that that's what they'll do, right? And I've never beaten anybody up for making a mistake. To me, it's a teaching opportunity, right? Security. And what I mean by security is you want to have people who are secure in who they are, right? Over the years, I've had several people that I've had to coach through that. And I recall a time in my own past where I had a really bad case of what's known as Imposter Syndrome. Have you guys heard of that? Okay, it's like, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing, and sooner or later, my leadership's going to find out, and I'm going to get fired and end up living in a box under a bridge somewhere, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. But if you can overcome that, and I did overcome that, and what finally did it for me was, I worked for some really, really smart people over the years, and no one's that good at fooling people. So maybe, just maybe, I do know what the hell I'm doing, right? And from that point, things just went exponentially for me. Self-discipline is an important attribute. You want to make sure that you've got people that will do what needs to be done, take responsibility for it. And one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my leadership is rather than dictate to people what they do in a very specific way, just to just convey to them, this is what I need done, this is when I need it done by. You figure out how you want to do it in a way that suits you, and as long as I get the results that I'm looking for, that's all I care about. Okay. Because that's a way to help people grow as well. So one of the things that Stephen Covey talks about in his 7 Habits, right, is what he calls stewardship delegation, right? This is what I need done. Here's the results I'm looking for. You figure it out. If you need help, if you want guidance, come back and talk to me, right? but then let them go do what they need to do. And within that, I will tell you that often you will find very creative, they'll come up with some very creative ways of doing things, and maybe that in a way that's more efficient than anybody in your group has done it before, and then you can apply that to everybody, right? Servanthood, and I think this is true at any level. I believe strongly in servant leadership, right? But you want that sense of servanthood at every level within your organization. Teachability, another important attribute. It's difficult to teach somebody who thinks they know it all, right? One of my daughters was tough to coach and teach something. She would get so mad and she'd, Dad, I already know that. Okay, right. And then she'd fail, and then she'd finally come back and say, okay, what am I doing wrong? Show her, and she'd do it well. And but you really want that teachability so that you can help them progress and learn and grow. Vision, and there again, people with vision, they don't see what is, they see what could be, right? And that's what you want. Passion, people who have passion, you don't have to hit them with the stick to get them to move, right? They'll go after stuff and work their hardest to excel if they've got that passion. And one of the things that I try to do, and it should be easy in our profession, because what I always try to do is instill in all of my teams to put the face of a family member or loved one in everything that they did, right? And I mean, for the hospitals that we worked in, John, that was a likely scenario, right? Where you're taking your families to these hospitals. The stuff that I work on could very well be connected to my mom or my sister or my wife or one of my kids. And so if you're able to do that, it changes everything and how people approach their jobs, right? And if they walk in with that mindset every morning, it really helps them be passionate about what they're doing. Positive attitude. Again, we've all got people that are Debbie Downers, and nobody wants to be around them. Nobody wants to work with them. Even the customers don't want them coming around, right? So you want people with positive attitudes, and then obviously problem solving. That's what we do, right? Our whole life is about solving problems. Okay. Let's try this. Awesome.
Who's the author of the first book you put up there, The Art of Possibility?
Yes.
Who's the author?
Rosamund and Benjamin Zander, Z-A-N-D-E-R. Okay. Okay, so the next question is how do I develop them? And when I say them, I'm not talking about just leaders, but this really applies to everything. So the first thing is, this came from a Deloitte research study in 2006, is the best way is the 70-20-10 rule. And what that is it's 70% on the job training, 20% mentoring and coaching, and 10% formal training. And that can come in the form of classes or technical training or books, right? It's things that you read. A lot of my own development came from, some of the books that I recommended to you guys. I mentioned Stewardship Delegation, and again, the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey talks at length about stewardship delegation. And again, it's again conveying, here's what I need done, here's when I need it done, and then the results I'm looking for, and then give them the opportunity to do that. But with that, I always recommend to schedule regular check-ins, because I had an analyst reporting to me once, and I laid out what I needed and when I needed it, and the day of he would deliver it, and it was completely the wrong thing. And obviously he was frustrated because he had put a ton of work into this, and yet I wasn't happy with it. I was frustrated because it wasn't what I was looking for. And so, that's something I recommend you do, is just schedule regular check-ins to make sure that they're going down the right path. Create a development plan, schedule one-on-ones. Another book that I've used for some of my direct reports is called Monday Morning Leadership by David Cottrell. And there's just a series of different exercises that, once a week, talk about a concept and have them go apply that, and then report back in the subsequent meeting. Tell me how that went. How did that play out for you? And then move on to the next thing, right? Classes, readings, seminars, organizations, leadership development program. Do all your organizations have a leadership development program that you can get people engaged in? Yeah. Take advantage of that. Amy has a lot of resources, and I'll walk through some of those. And again, I talked about Developing the Leader Within You by John C. Maxwell, and developing the leaders around you. Going back to the 70-20-10 model, and this is just a more detailed layout of what it is. So learning by doing, task diversity, learning from peers, special assignments, teaching others, increasing responsibility, changing roles, teamwork, working with other departments. And so for the tech level positions, you want to start giving them responsibility for things that are at that next level to help them prepare for that next level. Same thing with leadership roles. 20% coaching, one-on-ones, 360-degree feedback, formal mentoring programs, and performance reviews. And when I talk to people about performance reviews, I've had people in leadership roles that reported to me that were afraid to have frank conversations with their staff. They try to gloss over things and make it all positive. That's not helpful to that person. Okay, if you don't call out the things that they're not doing as well as they can do and help them develop a plan to shore up those things, you're not helping them. Okay, if somebody's messing up and I'm patting them on the back, how does that help? Right? It doesn't help them, it doesn't help you. And then 10% formal training, coursework, certifications, webinars, and conferences. Here's some good resources from Amy, and these were developed back in 2014, I believe. So one is the Career Planning Handbook, and then there's a Leadership Development Guide, and both of them contain a 6-step process in developing yourself and developing others. And the first is to determine your goals, both short-term and long-term. Second is to identify your needs, what skills, knowledge, and expertise are needed. The third is to assess your current state. Where do I stand now, right? The fourth is to identify what the gaps are. And then the fifth is to create a plan, right? Here's where I am, here's what I get to, here are the gaps, how do I get to that? What's my plan? And then step number 6 is to work that plan, okay? And that's true with literally anything, right? Developing a career ladder. So again, John, you are familiar with this one, but this is something that we developed when I was at Aurora, and it was important to help people feel as if they had room to grow and a path to follow. And with this, it got to a point where the only turnover that we had was like if somebody retired or if somebody's spouse moved to another state. But we didn't have people leaving because they didn't feel that they had opportunities, okay? And so the objectives were to acknowledge individuals' performance and accomplishments, set expectations for future performance, provide a tangible link to the job description, CE standards and performance, provide career growth opportunities, support recruitment and retention of CE techs, direct efforts for attaining department goals. And then within the operations of the career ladder, it consisted of all levels of biomedical and biomedical imaging technicians with criteria for each. Consideration for promotion is based on department needs and all promotional considerations being met. And this is an important thing to think about, because promotions are not based on longevity. Okay, if you come in as a Tech 1 and you're there for 20 years and you never progress as far as your technical ability and drive to get to another level, why would I promote you to a Tech 2 level? Really what I'm doing is setting you up for failure if I do so, right? Because you're going to get into that Tech 2 position, not be able to meet the needs of that position, and then things aren't going to end well, right? Leadership will communicate promotional opportunities to the technicians. Interested technicians must present evidence of meeting the stated criteria. A written narrative from the technician, including examples of achievement for each element of the career ladder, is required for advancement. The criteria will be reevaluated on a periodic basis. Annually, at performance review, all technicians are expected to present evidence that demonstrates that they continue to meet standards established for their current level. Technicians should document this within the self-eval section of the performance evaluation form. So you can see that this is a two-way street, right? That the career ladder sets a framework for you to move up if you're inclined to do so. By the same token, there's an expectation that you continue to meet the needs of this position you're in, and if you don't, then there's consequences for that, and that's covered in this next one. Technicians who do not continue to meet criteria for their current level will have goals set with the intent to reach that level. Failing to accomplish within 90 days will be considered a voluntary decision by the technician to no longer remain at that level and will result in a demotion to the appropriate level. Promotion via the career ladder is not dependent on years of employment, like I talked about. Rather, it's dependent on documented performance and development as stipulated herein. And then the required considerations, all the things we talked about: leadership, performance improvement, initiative, compliance with chemical engineering's data integrity policy, technical competence, communication effectiveness, compliance with CE policies and procedures, and personal and professional development. And then we had two different sections of that career ladder. One for technical. So we had biomedical assistant positions, were non-degree positions, and we would direct low-level type of work to those individuals that were less technical. Biomed Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3 could all move into either an imaging Tech 1 or an analyst position. And you might wonder, okay, that doesn't make sense. Why would you promote a Tech 1 into an imaging? Well, Reason being, and we didn't want to restrict this. There was acknowledgement that occasionally we would hire somebody that was more capable of what the Tech 1 position needed, but that's what we had open at the time, right? And they were more interested in getting their foot in the door and joining the organization, and so they took that position, right? We had that happen quite often. So you didn't want to restrict that person's ability to move into one of those other higher level technical positions, right? But then, that you could see from an imaging tech 1 to an imaging tech 2 to an imaging lead, and then all of those would have the ability to move up to a supervisor or lead or supervisor position, and eventually a regional manager position. Okay. We also had a career ladder for the admin roles. So if you were a customer service assistant or admin assistant, you had the ability to move into a report specialist position, and from there either into a clinical engineering analyst or a business systems analyst or a business development financial analyst position. So there was always room for you to grow, right, based on the needs of the organization. And we were always growing. We were always taking on more responsibility, and subsequently required new people. I want to tell a story about when we went through reorganization of our entire department. And what started that was the CFO in the central region, or the metro region, came to me and he said, this is at budget time. He said, Al, you guys have been doing a great job for us. We really appreciate it, but I need another $500,000 cut from your budget. Okay, let me see what I can do. So, we went back and analyzed the heck out of everything, and finally concluded that the only way that we were going to achieve that objective was to eliminate service contracts. And so we put together a business plan to insource a lot of that work. So we were going to, the CTs, the MRIs, the nuke med cameras, the linear accelerators, and so we put that plan together and presented it, and they bought it. And then so I was like, well, if it makes sense to do it in one region, we should do it in all regions, right? And so we made the same pitch to those other CFOs, and they all agreed. So we kind of looked at it and said, well, we could hire the positions that we need to do that, or we could redesign our whole service delivery model, and because we had limited equipment penetration in certain regions, that it would make it economically feasible to hire a guy to do like 2 nuke med cameras, right? So what we did is we just kind of broke down all of those regional barriers, and we created some zones that we covered, similar to like an ISO or an OEM would do. And so we completely redesigned our service delivery model. And with that, we ended up hiring 19 FTEs. Unheard of today, right? That you would be able to do that, but we were able to do that. And because the organization expected results in the short term, we ended up having to hire a bunch of outside people to come in and fill those roles, both technically and in leadership, some of the leadership positions we needed. And after the dust settled from all that, I went to my directors and I said, I never, ever want this to happen again. I never want to hire any position but that entry-level position. And I don't want to be able to promote from within, give our own people the opportunity to advance. And that's what we did. That's what prompted us to create that career ladder. But you have to be intentional about it. So that brings me to the Amy's succession planning guide. And I was one of the contributors to this, along with Angela Bennett from TriMedics. Doug Dreps from Mercy Health, Danielle McGeary, who is the VP of HTM for Amy, and Mark Woods from Cheshire Medical Center. And what this really does is help provide a succession plan or a clear roadmap to help you avoid making impulse decisions. And you know, we talked a lot about leadership development, but what would you do if you had a specialist doing CT and he left? Do you know how you would go about filling that position? You'd probably end up having to hire from the outside, right? And we all know that that's not an easy thing to accomplish. Sometimes it takes you 6 to 8 months to fill that role, sometimes longer, right? What do you do in the meantime? Well, your costs are going to go up because you're going to have to contract or with either an OEM or a third party, right? Don't put yourself in that position, right? Figure out for each position within your group, how would I fill that if that person left? And now through your annual performance reviews, you can have those discussions with your team. What do you want to do next? You know, what do you aspire to? And then, like I talked about, with giving people opportunities to start cross-training in those areas, make them ready for that. And so this does a really good job with that. And so here's the planning template. And so it gives you the employee's name, what their current role is, what their current specialty training and skills are, what their possible next role would be, and then what is their readiness to move. Here you can see BMed Benny, she's ready to move to that next role immediately because she's already got the skills, right? And here are the key competencies for that next role, the necessary training and development, and then what the employee wants, right? What their aspirations are. You can see, look at the next one, Supervisor Seth. His current role is a BMed supervisor, but he wants to move up to a manager position. Okay. Well, with what he needs, with what his gaps are, it's going to take 1 to 2 years. You don't want to wait until the opening is there before you help that person get ready for that role. So what do they need? Well, the competencies for that next role, financial and business acumen. They need training and mentoring on the deeper aspects of budgeting and financial considerations. And you look at what Seth's aspirations are. Well, he'd like to become a manager in 1 to 2 years and plans to retire at 8 years. So, you know, it lays this out very, very nicely, and it's a great way to have those discussions with your team at performance review time. And it was interesting when I think back about what our budget cycle was. Our performance reviews happened at the perfect time because it was usually in the first quarter of the year that we would do performance reviews. And we started our budget process in June. So through that whole performance review process where you're having these types of discussions, you now know what you might have to budget for with regard to training, right? So that you've now collected that information about what training you need and how much it's going to cost, so that when budget time rolls around, you know, you're ready to plug those numbers into your budget.